I had Ted Nugent on the show during lockdown, I think, and he was remote, and he had this term where he harvests the animals.
Right.
And I just thought it was an interesting term because the way he presents that is it's just all part of the life cycle.
Right.
And when we grow up, and again, both of my grandparents were, well, one was a cattle rancher, as I mentioned, one was on a farm. Mm-hmm. And when you grow up in these rural environments, it's part of the life cycle. And you get used to it, and animals die, and you eat them, and then new ones come in the next season, and it's part of life. But when we get isolated from nature or
right.
these parts, or we go into cities, then killing an animal, I mean, it's something shocking, something you're not used to doing. You don't do it growing up. And is this part of what's happening to our culture? Are we being separated from our roots, from nature?
Right.
And is that causing a lot of this?
Right. Well, I mean, I think 100 years ago, something like 30% of the people in the United States were involved in food production. Now it's about 1.5% of the people feed 330 million people in the United States. And so we've become further and further removed from food production. You know, I think you saw that advertisement in Saudi Arabia for the wine, that city of the future they're trying to make, the 34, you know, it's like 500 meters across or something like that, 200 meters across, 500 meters high, and 170 kilometers long. They're going to pack 9 million people in there, you know, and you know they want to take people off the land, put them in these little cities, and then you know some corporation owns all the land, and we don't have our land anymore, and so. That is a real problem because most people don't. And I've had the privilege, and I consider it a privilege, to go to these ranches and see ranchers and spend time with them and see what they do and what they truly care about these animals. I mean, that is, not only is their livelihood, but they go into it because they care about animals. It's not because they are mean to them and they hate them and all this vegan propaganda. You know, they find the worst of the worst examples and they compile it, and it takes them, like Cowspiracy took like 7 years to get enough footage to make a movie. It took them 7 years of digging and digging and digging. And so it's, the ranchers I know, they just take the best care. I mean, there's cows calving at 2 o'clock in the morning in a blizzard in Wyoming, and guess what they're doing? They're out there at 2 o'clock in the morning getting up to take care of these animals. I mean, your grandfather probably did stuff like that. Yeah. So it's like I said, the vegan narrative is so far removed from the truth. We could find any human behavior, right? And if we try to extrapolate it upon all human beings, we wouldn't want to be human beings anymore because you can find bad people all over the place.
Yeah. What about hunters? Because that's pretty fascinating. You know quite a few hunters, and that Rogan's a hunter, obviously. That really triggers the vegans, and then the hunters will be the first ones to tell you that they actually care more about the environment and have more of a relationship with the environment and the animals than a vegan in New York City. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think hunting, certainly, I mean, unfortunately we can't all hunt. With the number of animals wouldn't support hunting, so we need domestic animals. But hunting, I don't see a problem with it at all. I mean, they do a very good job, and the hunting is, particularly in the United States, is very well controlled. You know, the animals that are being hunted are going to be a problem if they don't hunt them. And so, all of us, all animals are going to be food at some point. You and I are going to turn into food at some point when we're done, and every single animal goes. And as opposed to humane slaughter, and I know vegans say there's no such term, but if you ask a cow, there's an interesting study out of the University of Pennsylvania. They looked at white-tailed deer, which are ruminant grazing animals, and they tagged a bunch of them at birth, and they tracked them for 32 weeks. Over 50% were dead. Didn't get to 32 weeks, and most of them died through predation. They were torn apart by a bear or a coyote, or they starved to death, or they died of an injury. That's how most of them die in the wild. And you compare that to a cow, which has about a 98% chance to making it to full adulthood. It's protected, it's fed, it's sheltered, no predators eat them. They literally have one bad second of their life.
Right.
They're in there getting their back scratched. You go look at these new commercial dairies. They got back scratchers and automatic milkers, and they're just hanging out, laying in soft beds. For an animal, they've got a great life. They're almost like pets, just about like pets are treated.
That's pretty fascinating. Whereas in the wild, you got to deal with the hard times out there. And in a hunter, it's a good death, right? Because it's one shot.
If it's a good hunter, that's right. You got to have a hunter that can shoot.
Okay. Indian subcontinent, most of those people were probably vegan for the last couple hundred years.
Well, I mean, they're vegetarian. They're not
vegetarian,
vegan. But
okay.
This is an interesting thing about India. So, in the world, there are about 1.1 billion head of cattle, right? The largest number of them are in India right now. There's 200 million cattle in India, another 100 million water buffaloes. They have 300 million of those cattle there. The United States has about 92 million or 93 million, something like that, depending on the year. In India, those cattle are, they still export cattle, they still slaughter cattle there, but most of them are kind of left free to roam. Right. They are, unfortunately, not well bred genetically. They are full of parasites. They don't produce very good meat. I mean, they're just very slow at producing that. And so, ironically, we could probably double or triple our animal, food production worldwide if countries like India and some of these other countries that are very inefficient were to improve their efficiency standards with breeding, with nutrition, with just some of the more modern techniques that we have.
If they wanted to eat meat.
If they wanted to, right.
Okay.
Right.
And as a population, they do okay being vegetarians?
Well, I don't know they do. Their life expectancy is pretty low. I mean, they're about 65 life expectancy, so they're definitely bottom half of the world. Some people will attribute that to poverty. Right. They have very high rates of diabetes, very high rates of heart disease. Interesting, there was a study out of University of Adelaide just earlier this year, I believe, and they looked at 175 countries throughout the world. And they saw, even accounting for socioeconomic status, wealth, all kinds of other variables, the countries that ate the most meat had the highest life expectancies across the board.
Interesting. And you like to cite Iceland, which is a country that's been massively isolated.
Right.
Not a lot of agriculture on that island.
Right, you can't. I mean, have you been to Iceland?
I actually haven't. I've seen pictures.
I've been to Iceland. I've been to Iceland in January. There are no mangoes growing in Iceland in January. I can verify that. Yeah.
Or is it just cold?
It's cold, but it's it's a frozen rock in the North Atlantic, right? And they have fish, and they have some sheep and a few cattle, and they would import a little bit of barley from Denmark, and that was their food, in the dairy, and that was really the foods they had. So when I went to Iceland to talk about a carnivore diet, they're like, yeah, we get it. I mean, this is basically all we had for most of our existence. And in Iceland, for instance, the number of centenarians, people over 100, male centenarians, one of the highest places in the world. And of course, they're absolutely prolific at sports. Strongman athletes and CrossFit athletes have been dominating for a country of only, I think there's 300,000 people in Iceland, and they dominate sports-wise because their diet is heavily animal-based.
And some genetics maybe too.
Right, genetics as well.
Right. Interesting. If somebody's intrigued by this, how do they test it? How do they try it?
Well, I think that, depending on where you are, if you're on a lot of medications, it makes sense to have a physician overseeing things because you're going to come off those medications. If you're on diabetic medications, insulin, sulfonylurea, if you're on antidepressants, if you're on antihypertensive meds, you're going to need some support. And that's what our company is going to be set up to do. We have physicians that understand this and help get people off medications.
You're going to come off them, or you're going to want to come off of them?
Well, you're probably going to come off of those medications.
Just because you're going to change your diet and you're going to feel better.
just because you're not going to need them, you're going to feel better. Yeah.
And then when you toss them aside, you got to be a little careful.
Right. You've got to be careful how you taper off on the medications.
Okay.
So that's
you're just convinced they're going to come off them.
Well, yeah, we see it over and over again. Yeah. Okay. I mean, sometimes some quicker than others, depending on what's going on. But yeah, it's very rare where people don't start to either reduce their dosage or completely come off. In fact, we did in the setting of 12,000 people, we had about 5,000 people that reported medication usage, and something like 79% of them within 3 months came off, either completely off all meds or significantly cut back. Within 3 months, we had 80% reduction in medications, which again, Big Pharma's not going to be happy about that, right? That's their annual plan is being harmed with that.
Not going to be happy at all about that.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't going to be happy with you.
Yeah, sure.
Do you ever feel that out there or no?
I do. I mean, like I said, I get, and I'm, it's kind of funny because all I'm doing is, seeing wins and seeing people help and saying this is what we're doing. And it's funny, when I was an orthopedic surgeon making, $750,000 operating on people, no one said a word. It's like, oh, you're good, you're a hero, right? Now I'm in here taking people off medications, getting rid of diseases, and now I'm a villain suddenly. I shouldn't make any money on that. It's just kind of a weird sort of dynamic with that.
Hey, do you want to profit from crypto? Then join my DeFi Academy. The Crypto DeFi Academy will help you create generational wealth. But don't take my word for it. Listen to my students.
When I first got into crypto, I remember thinking to myself, I need to learn more. Brian Rose, learning crypto, learning DeFi, got to do it.
I am so grateful that I jumped in and did this. I had to break through some limiting beliefs that I can do this, that I can afford this, that I can be in this.
It challenges the things that are deeply rooted within us.
Joining DeFi Academy has been one of the best decisions I have made on my blockchain journey.
This course was a life changer, a game changer, a huge eye-opener, coming from knowing practically nothing at the speed of the learning over 4 weeks was just fantastic.
The information you provided in this class was invaluable.
I feel far more confident in my next steps.
You took complex concepts and made them easier to understand.
What's different than so many other ones is it just doesn't tell you what to do. It actually makes you do it.
This is for people who are serious about becoming traders. This is the way it should be done.
I realized from this learning experience again that it is not about what you learn, but about who you learn it from.
The energy was insane. I've never experienced such incredible energy on a live call. Brian Rose, you are a legend, my friend.
It's the only thing in the market where you can get all information and learn everything what you need to know.
Everything is so clear and so well done, and I'm just forever grateful for this program.
It made me feel so much more confident about crypto than I did before.
I did not anticipate how passionate I was going to become about it.
It's also been like a big learning experience for me, not just in the crypto space, but just in overall balance of life.
What I've learned is, how to take ownership, of my life in a way that I really hadn't before.
Yeah, you can't put a price on that, really.
I would recommend it to anybody, top notch.
Excellence does not come cheap. So if you want excellence, you got to pay for it, but it's so worth it.
Pull the trigger. That's what this course is about.
You're not going to regret it, really. It's amazing.
Thank you, Brian and team.
So what are you waiting for? Crypto is happening now. Click the link below, submit your application, and let me mentor you on how to create generational wealth and build the decentralized financial infrastructure of the future.